may be seated. So there's a lot going on in today's gospel reading, and I would invite you to reflect on which of these personalities in this reading you relate to the most. Now, the vineyards are ripe. There is urgency to harvest the fruit. Time is of the essence. The fruit, if it is not picked soon, it will spoil on the vine. Or perhaps an infestation of bugs will come and claim it as it sits there in the hot sun. Perhaps a natural disaster will come along and it will cause the fruit to fall from the vines onto the ground, and it will be destroyed by frost and trampled underfoot. My goodness, 1,000 things could go wrong at harvest season because the vineyards are ripe and there is urgency. There is urgency to harvest the fruit. That's the gospel reading today. Isn't it amazing when the readings reflect what is going on around us? That's today's gospel. Today's landowner goes out 5 times in one day to secure enough laborers to complete the task of bringing in the harvest. It is a bumper crop year. My goodness, in today's gospel, we must have had a lot of rain in the springtime. And now the urgency is there. That fruit has to get off the vines yesterday. Now we know, not only is the harvest important for us today, but 1,000, 2,000 years ago, the whole welfare and well-being of the community depended on it. If the harvest is spoiled, the effects of that loss are going to be immediately felt and immediately recognizable in the community. There's no food terminal in the 1st century. Nobody is going to reallocate the food. If the crop succeeds, well, the community rejoices. If the crop fails, well, who knows? Death comes to everyone eventually. So there is urgency in today's gospel, and this is exactly the case. This is exactly what is happening in this story. The land has brought forth abundance. So much abundance. The crop is so plentiful. The landowner needs to go and find more than his regular complement of workers. He needs 5 times the number. We're told that in the gospel. He goes out. He goes out to get some. In the morning, he goes out again. He goes out 5 times. Why? Because it's so abundant. He just can't get enough people working in his field. So it's odd, isn't it? It's very odd in the midst of all of this abundance that we hear the landowner in verse 15 admonish a group of people who have been working with him all day. And he says, "Do you begrudge my generosity? Do you begrudge my generosity?" Why does he say this? Because at the end of the day, he gives everybody an equal share. The guy who came at 8 in the morning, the fellow who came at noon, the guy who came at 3, it doesn't matter. He pays them all the same. And guess what? The ones who came at 8 o'clock are grumbling. We wanted more. I mean, has this ever happened to you in your life? Have you ever been at work and no matter what you do, somebody begrudges you?
No.
There used to be a saying on the refrigerator in the office where I used to work. It said, "We the willing, led by the unknown, do the impossible for the ungrateful." And that could not apply more to the sentiments that the landowner is saying today. Are you begrudging my generosity? Now, I said to you earlier, who did you initially relate to? Did you relate in this story to the landowner or to the workers? Because I think Jesus is assuming that we're going to at first relate to and with the workers, right? It's not fair. Logic tells us it's not fair. I've been here since 8 o'clock. I've worked a 12-hour day. It's not fair that the guy who works 5 hours is being paid the same as me. But, even though it might seem unfair by the logical standard that we would like to apply to it, there is a gravitas. There is a gravitas that the landowner represents. An importance to what he says. Do you begrudge my generosity? How dare you begrudge my generosity? Everyone is paid an equal share because everyone is equally invested in the survival of the community and the common good. The harvest is harvest for all. When some mourn, all mourn. When some rejoice, all rejoice. The harvest is plentiful, we can all rejoice. If it wasn't plentiful, we're all going to die on the side of the road. Because, folks, we're in it together. So the landowner is reminding us of God's generosity falling on all of us equally. God's grace falls on everyone, even those we assume are the least well-deserving. So today's gospel not only reflects what is happening in the world around us, and we don't have to go very far in St. Catherine's to see that the harvest is plentiful, but also reminds us of the generosity of God. The landowner is a very generous man. He sees generosity, he sees care of the neighbor as his moral responsibility. He has been given lordship over resources, and he exercises this office with seriousness and impartiality. I remember when I was studying ethics, one of my professors once said, "Would you rather have a judge who takes pity or a judge who has mercy?" Today, in this gospel reading, we are reminded that this landowner shows no partiality. His generosity is generosity that extends to everyone for the welfare of the common good and the community. So as we are in this harvest season, I think especially in the midst of the natural disasters that have claimed so many parts of our hemisphere, it calls to a deep place inside of us, that our generosity would be like that of the landowner, who shows no partiality, but administers his resources with justice, that what he has is not his, he is not the judge, but he is a gracious host. So let's take a few moments now, before we move on with the service, to reflect on those parts of our lives right now where God has blessed us with abundance, and where God is calling that abundance to be of benefit for His world.